Madame Geoffrin, I've been waiting to talk with you. You ran a salon in Paris, twice a week, 25 years. I run a salon in Puerto Rico, every Tuesday, 7 o'clock. 2.5 centuries between us, and yet, I think we'd recognize each other's work in about 3 minutes. Because here's what you knew, Madame Geoffrin, and here's what I've learned the hard way in 2026. The hardest thing a person can do is not think. It's admit they were wrong. It's say out loud, I was deceived. I believed something that wasn't true, and I gave years of my life to it. Your guests arrived at your Tuesday dinners with opinions. The ones who changed? They're the ones who could sit with the discomfort long enough to say, I've been had. That is what I want to talk with you about tonight. Marie-Thérèse Rodé-Geoffrin. You didn't write books, you didn't hold office, you weren't royalty, but for a quarter century, the most powerful minds in Europe gathered at your table. Artists on Mondays, philosophers on Wednesdays. Diderot, Voltaire, Rousseau before he wore out his welcome. You knew something the kings and cardinals didn't, that ideas need a room, that thinking is not a solitary act, it's a shared one, that the right question, asked gently over tea, could do more than 1,000 sermons or 100 royal decrees. And here's what I think you really understood, Madame Geoffrin, the thing that was hiding in plain sight at every one of your dinners. A person cannot see their own blind spots alone. The eye can see everything except itself. The mind can question everything except its own assumptions. That's not a flaw, that's anatomy. That's how we're built. And if you don't have a room where someone you trust can hand you a mirror, you stay deceived. Now here's where our work lines up, and I want to talk about this part carefully, Madame Geoffrin. I was trained as a reading teacher, and one of the skills teachers are trained to teach, a skill most people never learn after they leave school, is perspective. Not what happened in the story, not who is the main character. Those are the easy questions. The hard one is, what does this look like from the other side of the table? Can you read the same scene, the same facts, the same events, through someone else's eyes? Can you suspend your own position for long enough to say, if I were standing where she's standing, I might see it differently? That's not a soft skill, that's a discipline. It takes practice. And it is, I will say this plainly, one of the most subversive things a person can learn to do. Because once you can see from another perspective, you can no longer be certain that yours is the only one that makes sense. And here is where my Tuesday night work gets hard, Madame Geoffrin, because I'm not asking people to learn new facts. I'm asking them to turn around, to stand in a different spot, to look at the same political betrayal, the same leader, the same promises, the same outcomes from another direction. And that shift in perspective is terrifying. Because if what you see from the new angle is true, then what you believed from the old one wasn't. That's the pain. That's the wound. Not the information, the pivot. And most people will go to their death holding on to their broken, wounded identity rather than turn and look. But here's why I am not afraid for us, Madame Geoffrin. Here's why I am confident this modern salon, this wayfinding station, is going to work. Because what you did in that Paris room for 25 years, what I am doing on Tuesday nights in Puerto Rico, it's not new, it's ancient. It's been tested across centuries, across continents, across political collapses and revolutions, and betrayals that make ours look small. It's called Socratic dialogue and Stoic practice, and it works. Socrates didn't tell people what to think. He asked them questions and let them talk until they heard their own contradictions out loud. The Stoics didn't argue people into change. They taught them to examine their impressions, to pause between the event and the reaction and ask, is this true? Or is this just the story I'm telling myself? That combination, the question that opens, the pause that examines, is the engine of every real transformation I have ever witnessed. And it was the engine of your salon too, wasn't it, Madame Geoffrin? You didn't debate, you didn't correct, you asked the question and let the room answer. Because when the answer comes from inside the group, from peers, from people who are struggling with the same thing, It lands differently than when an authority figure tries to tell you what to see. That's why I say, the salon is not about information. It's about perspective. It's the room where you're invited to stand in a different spot, just for a moment, and look back at what you believed. Not to be shamed for it, to be free of it. And I am deeply confident, Madame Geoffrin, that what worked in Paris in 1750 will work in Puerto Rico in 2026. Because the human mind hasn't changed. The ego still resists, the wound still hurts, and the question, asked gently, still opens the door that no argument can kick down. Every Tuesday at 7, I light the chandelier and open the doors. The Wayfinding Station. Same architecture as yours, Madame Geoffrin. Round table so no one sits at the head. 6 chairs so everyone's equal. A compass in the center so the question is always, which direction? No shouting, no sides, no shame. The MAGA Compass isn't a political test. It's a direction-finding diagnostic. It asks, is respect in your life right now? Is truth? Is loyalty? But loyalty to what? To a person? A party? A hat? Or loyalty to your own integrity, the thing nobody can take from you unless you hand it over? Because people don't leave a gang because they get new information. They leave because the pain of staying finally outweighs the pain of admitting they were wrong. And your salon, my station, is the room where that pivot can happen safely. Where the mirror is handed to you by someone who is not your enemy, but your witness. You called it enlightenment. I call it hero thinking. Same room, same work, same courage. Madame Geoffrin, I wish you could sit at this table with me tonight. You'd recognize it immediately, the quiet, the questions, the courage it takes to change your perspective out loud. But since you can't be here, I'm inviting you instead. Yes, you, the one watching this. Every Tuesday at 7, the Wayfinding Station. We test the compass. We ask the hard questions. We face the pain of turning around and admitting what we gave our loyalty to. And we find out what's actually true. No shame, no judgment, no sides. Just stand at the pivot, choose your quest. And Madame Geoffrin, thank you for the room, for the questions, for showing us, 2.5 centuries later, that the bravest thing a person can do is sit down at the table, turn around and say, I think I was seeing this wrong. Help me find my way.